Gold Derbyite, we're here to talk about drama supporting actor at the Emmy race this year, and it's a really good one. I'm here joined by Amanda Spears, Riley Chow, and Zach Laws, and we've watched the episodes. We think we know who might win, but remember the rules have changed this year, and it's not always about episode submission. It's also about really who's more popular and what show is more popular. So I think I might go to Zach first, because I'd like to just hear from each of you who you think, if it was just based on the episodes and not on a popular ballot, who do you think would win? Zach?
I would put money on either Kit Harington or Jonathan Banks if it were based on the episodes. Because, I think for Kit Harington, this whole season of Game of Thrones has just been superior for him, more so than his competition, Peter Dinklage. And Jonathan Banks is just great in everything. So if it's just based on the episodes. As far as who I think would actually win, I would say Peter Dinklage, since he won last year, but I'm not at all confident about that. I think either Kit Harington or Jonathan Banks could actually win.
Okay, that's interesting. We're also joined by Tony Ruiz. Hi, Tony. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, look, what I should also do is just quickly run through who's been nominated. I'm sorry about that. So Jonathan Banks, Better Call Saul for the episode Barley High. Peter Dinklage for Game of Thrones for the episode No One. Kit Harington for Game of Thrones for the episode Battle of the Bastards. Michael Kelly for House of Cards for Chapter 44. Ben Mendelsohn from Bloodline for episode 210. And John Voight for Ray Donovan for the episode The Kalamazoo. Okay, so I'm going straight to you, Amanda. What do you think? Are you on the same line as Zach, or do you have something different to say?
Based on tapes alone, Peter Dinklage, 100%, no doubt. I will say this, he was so smart submitting the episode before Battle of the Bastards because he knew that had to be what Kit was going to submit. So he submitted the episode before, and you just get all these different looks at him throughout both episodes. And he didn't help out Kit because he didn't submit an episode where Kit Harington appears. So I would say double the pleasure. Same way Jim Parsons pulled this off, the same way some of the Modern Family guys have pulled it off. He would absolutely win this year under the tape system. I would have no doubt about it.
See, that's fascinating. Before I go to Riley and Tony, I just want to say that this is what we call the Felicity Huffman rule. And so back in the day on Desperate Housewives, you had the 3 Desperate Housewives, the main characters nominated, and Felicity Huffman kind of storms into the pool in the pilot. I think it's the pilot, and she grabs her kids, and she's kind of good in that. She's pretty good. But she's really, really, really good as well in Marsha Cross and Terry Hatcher's episodes as well. And we started to cotton on to this rule that if you're in a category with your co-stars and your co-stars episode submissions help you out, then you really have 2 or 3 episode submissions kind of working for you. And what Amanda's saying is that really helps Peter Dinklage. It's really interesting, but it doesn't help Kit Harington. Riley, what do you think? If it was based on tapes alone, who do you think would win?
If it was based on tapes alone, I would go with Peter Dinklage by default. I think all of these tapes are terrible. Disgrace this category to the people who have won in recent years. You know, Aaron Paul, he always submitted a great one. You know, Peter Dinklage, when he won the first time, we used to have those Lost guys. This is a category that had a long line of different winners for a very long time, and they were all very deserving. This year we have 6 people who had better episodes last year, and for some reason they're still nominated this year. And in those kinds of cases where nobody has a good episode, I found that the Emmys would just go with whoever was the most interesting character or whoever was their favorite from past roles. Like when Maggie Smith won, or I don't know, Archie Panjabi won, she's playing kind of an interesting character, or Jeremy Davies. I think there are a lot of cases where nobody had a good episode, and then they just went with, you know, whoever they thought was cool, which I think Peter Dinklage is. Tyrion will always be a fan favorite.
Okay, that's interesting. Tony, what do you think?
I completely agree that this was kind of a blah category. There's not one episode where the performance jumps out at you the way like an Aaron Paul or someone like that does. I was really surprised as a whole that Michael Kelly had such a kind of blah season on House of Cards. His submission actually to me feels like one of the more substantial ones because he's in a lot of that submission, and he actually is so fascinating to watch. He has a couple of moments of some real like just kind of jump out, like especially where he tackles Seth and basically says, if I won't have your loyalty, I'll have your obedience. I thought that was great. I would agree that it would probably, if we're going by just the tapes alone, probably Dinklage because he is the most fascinating character. The thing about Kit Harington's submission is that the great thing, the thing about that submission is that the performance really isn't because he's acting. He's more just kind of reacting to the chaos that's in it. He's the focal point, really, of the episode, but it's not the focal point because of his acting. It's the focal point because of the battle, because of everything that's going on. So yeah, to me, it's kind of Dinklage by default.
Wow.
I will say that if Jonathan Banks had submitted Gloves Off instead of the episode that he did submit, then I would say that he would have had the best tape and could have won that way.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
I want to go through each of their submissions in more detail, but I will say that I am a little surprised by some of your reactions because, how do I put this? I think Kit Harington, I think what Tony says is pretty accurate about Kit Harington, but for me personally, if I was a voter, I thought it was so effective that I would say he would win based on his performance in Battle of the Bastards. It triggered an emotional reaction with me. What he was doing in that episode and his character's battle with Ramsay the other bastard, and I don't know, I just thought, and it was so physical. It's such a physically demanding performance that he gave, and he is freaking Jon Snow, and so the whole series seems to be about him, and the Emmy voters love Game of Thrones, and I think now that they've got the opportunity to give him the trophy, I just have this sneaking feeling that not only is it based on the episode, but just on popularity, he might get ahead of Peter Dinklage. So that's where I'm sitting at the moment. This one's a really difficult category because I agree, Jonathan Banks, Michael Kelly, Ben Mendelsohn, and Jon Voight, I felt their episodes were underwhelming, and we're just being honest based on what we've seen. So, okay, let's go through each of them. Who would like to talk about Jonathan Banks? Because I thought he should have submitted Gloves Off as well. Riley, do you want to go into more detail? I thought Barley High for me was kind of a bit of a snore.
Yeah, in this episode he does have that tender moment with his granddaughter, which is something. But other than that, he's kind of just listening to Mark Margolis, or he's, I don't know, putting his welcome mat down. Whereas in the episode Gloves Off, you've got the trademark Mike sarcasm, and he's, being a badass. He's, wrecking the other guy's car and getting into a fist fight. It's all the reasons why people love this character.
Yeah, Amanda, do you agree with that, right?
I do agree with it. I have him in third because I think that he does have some overall goodwill that might help him. That he did get a lot of press for not winning last year. And I think I don't think it was a stupid submission. No. There is something to be said about the fact that he's revisiting all these Breaking Bad characters, which might have been the reason he chose it. But it wasn't. It's not last year. I mean, let's face it. He might have only had one real legit shot at winning this thing. But if he did win, I think it wouldn't shock me.
Zach?
I was going to ask that. I mean, obviously last year he was sort of a favorite to win because he had a fantastic episode, and I think it's a real shame that he didn't win. Do you think that there are enough people in the Academy who might have wanted him to win last year, because he has been around for about 30 years now? He's never won before, and he's playing a character that they know him for. Do you think that there's A, enough goodwill there for him to win, and B, that Kit Harington and Peter Dinklage could split their own vote?
That's a good point.
Because I think that of these other 4 nominees that aren't from Game of Thrones, he would be the one that had the best chance of winning. As much as I love Ben Mendelsohn and Michael Kelly and Jon Voight, you know, I think that Banks would be the biggest possibility for an upset.
Yeah. Where do you sit on that, Tony?
To me, if Banks couldn't win last year, when Better Call Saul was kind of a breakout hit, and he had the tape, I was really underwhelmed by this tape. I was really, and I'm not a regular Better Call Saul viewer, but to me, you know, he's had much better submissions for both Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, and couldn't win with those. And to me, it would seem odd if he were to win for this. It doesn't ring true to me that he would win for this.
Well, it did seem odd when he won. When Peter Dinklage won last year, when a lot of us could have thought he could have upset Aaron Paul for the final season of Breaking Bad. So there might have been a little residual goodwill towards Peter Dinklage that we weren't thinking about last year, and now maybe that's kind of shifted to Jonathan Banks, where maybe it was Peter Dinklage's episode last year wasn't that great. Jonathan Banks isn't that great either. So maybe that residual goodwill, that's why I have him in third. It helps him out a little bit.
Okay. Well, the thing is, like, I don't want to. It's hard for me to say this because I don't like to criticize them too much, but I must say with Better Call Saul, when the show started to focus on Jonathan Banks's character storyline, I started to get a little bored, and when it was more about you know, Saul Goodman and his background and Reyes Sehorn, that's when I started getting really interested. So I just think it was the weaker part of the season, and that's not necessarily the actor's fault. It's really just the way it is, and that's my opinion. And so watching Bali High, I was really kind of just underwhelmed and thought, well, if you're going to win because of overdueness or whatever, then it's a shame that it'll be for this. Because, you know, he has had such great submissions in the past. Last year was it was so sad to see him not win for that really great knockout performance he gave in that episode from the first season. So I'm just like really all over the place with Jonathan Banks. I don't know what's going to happen. I have him in third as well. I could even probably put him in second because I think that he is so overdue, and I'm not sure that Peter Dinklage could possibly win yet again. But yeah, I want to talk more about Peter Dinklage now, because in this category we saw for so long that it was a different person winning every year, and then we started seeing repeat winners from Aaron Paul, and now Peter Dinklage just seems to be the Doris Roberts of this category. So I'd really like to go to... He's only won twice, so it feels like he's won like 8 times. And he didn't do a lot this season in Game of Thrones. Don't you agree? Who would like to go first? Because he didn't do a lot, but then when he is on the screen, especially in the episode where he's when he has all the interplay with Emilia Clarke, really good, really good. Who would like to go first?
I think that if Kit Harington had not been nominated, he would have probably submitted Battle of the Bastards himself, because he's in about 20 minutes of it that are revolving around his themes. We saw him last year submit Hard Home, which would have been probably Kit Harington's submission if he had been nominated. So I will say he was very strategic. If someone does sit down and watch both supporting categories, he is one of the only ones who appears in all 4 episodes. So, yeah, and his character is one of the more popular ones.
I mean, yeah, look, I love Peter Dinklage. I love him in the show, and there's plenty of times where he didn't win, and he had fantastic episodes, heartbreaking episodes that he should have won for. And so I think that's part of the reason why he won last year, was because he's been so good so often in that show. So, I mean, I don't disparage him winning again. I do like to see some variety every once in a while, but you know, yeah. I mean, it's a fine episode. I just thought this whole season overall was not like last season. It didn't have as much focus on him, and I mean, that's just one of the things that happens when you have a show with so many characters.
Yeah,
You know,
that's true.
it's hard to get a good episode unless it is like Battle of the Bastards, where you're just in it by default for, because it's a battle or something.
Mm.
To me, it was really interesting that if you look at No One as a submission for Dinklage, he's basically in three separate scenes. He has the first scene in the beginning where he's saying goodbye, and then he has the scene at the end, which is basically just awaiting the reemergence of Daenerys. It's really that big scene in the middle. And what was surprising to me, because I watched Game of Thrones all season and loved it, but didn't think that this was his season. But I had forgotten how good that one scene in the middle is, because it's really surprisingly, it's funny with all the joke telling thing and the drinking, and I love anything having to do with wine. And
I hear
Me too.
and that little thing about, to me, the most affecting part was the part where he talks about, I want to open my own vineyard and have my own wine. It'll just be for my friends. I thought that was a really surprisingly touching moment, and I actually think that he did more in this episode. This episode touched me more than his winning submission last year.
Wow.
Yeah, he keeps starting that brothel joke. I want to finally hear the end of it. Every time he starts it, someone interrupts him, or there's an explosion. At this point, I really want to hear the end of it. I know that's off topic, but
2 more episodes to go. Riley, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this episode kind of demonstrates Peter Dinklage's role in Game of Thrones the last couple seasons. I mean, the whole concept behind his main scene in this episode is he's just trying to teach other people how to tell jokes. Like, you kind of wonder how this made it, onto the show in the first place. But they just want to give Peter Dinklage something to do because he's so watchable. And I think last year we were all trying to find out, do the tapes matter at all? And Peter Dinklage submitted, a nothing tape, and Jonathan Banks submitted the best possible tape. And they went so far in the other direction that I think they just do not matter at all. The only way I would say that Jonathan Banks might win this year is because I think we all acknowledge that he came second last year just because of residual Breaking Bad love, and Peter Dinklage, took all the Game of Thrones love votes, and they obviously love Game of Thrones right now. So if there is a split between Kit Harington coming in, then Jonathan Banks will be the first person to benefit from that.
Interesting. You're all starting to convince me a little that maybe the Kit Harington thing is not necessarily so sure. I remember when the nominations were announced, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, Kit Harington's going to win this now," without really having thought about it properly. And now that we've looked at this more carefully, yeah, you're right. Peter Dinklage does do a lot of stuff that's a bit more subtle and has a bit more nuance and is funny, and so there are other things. He has more of the range. It's just that on impact, it could be that Kit Harington may have that particular part sewn up. It's hard to say. The vote splitting thing is something that I hate always turning to, but it is a thing, and there are 2 of them here. And so watch out for a surprise. We really should, before we go, talk about the other 3 nominees without... I don't want to just give them short shrift, but I do think that Michael Kelly, Ben Mendelsohn, and John Voight probably not in this race compared to the other 3 nominees. They're all great, deserving nominees, brilliant actors. I'm just not sure that they will have enough votes to win. Does anyone think that any of those 3 could surprise us, though?
I think if any of them surprise, it would be Michael Kelly. Because I was surprised at how effective. I think of all of them, with the exception of Kit Harington, Michael Kelly is in so much of his episode, and he's being both menacing, and he's also quite vulnerable because he kind of feels like everything's out of his control, and you get to see all the things that make that character so interesting. And I'm not a regular House of Cards watcher, and I was really taken with how good Kelly is, doing so little. As far as Ben Mendelsohn goes, how was he even nominated?
They love him.
I don't get it.
I'll stick up for Ben Mendelsohn. You know, and I was surprised
Not
by
his
that
fellow
too.
Aussie, we should mention.
Yeah. I was very surprised that he got nominated too, just because I thought he totally was deserving last year. He's not in it a lot this season. Now, apparently, in season 3, he's going to make a huge comeback. So maybe.
Are they resurrecting him from the dead?
Yeah.
Like,
I think that the episode that he submitted, it was the best option that he had, but it's a really good performance by him in that. I don't know if they have any regular Bloodline viewers here, but the episode that he submitted is a very good episode for him. It's very emotional. He's making a sacrifice for his estranged son. He's having this conflict with his father, and then he says goodbye to his son and essentially tells him to stay away from him because he's no good for him. And it's a really good example of the kind of impression that you can make with a limited amount of screen time if you're a good enough actor. So I think that's probably what pushed him over into getting a nomination. And I think that Michael Kelly was also deserving of getting nominated. He didn't have as much to do this season because last season his character had such a definitive arc. But this season he did have a lot to do. I mean, the whole storyline about taking the liver away from the guy and then donating money to the guy's widow and taking her out on dates. I mean, all of that stuff was very dramatic and showed the kind of range that he has as an actor.
Just to stick up for... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just to stick up for Jon Voight, I don't... I watched Ray Donovan when I'm like sick on the couch, so I don't really remember it most of the time. But I will say for him in this episode, he was very likable. He's babysitting this kid. He's trying to visit his son. He is likable, and in a popular vote, he is an Oscar winner. He is a movie star. He is the father of a movie star. He might just be the Maggie Smith of this category. So that's one of the things. That's probably the reason why I have him in 3rd or 4th place. Is because, well, I probably have him in 4th place. I haven't checked. And he doesn't do a whole lot, but he is Jon Voight. So
yeah, he wasn't nominated last year though. So like his popularity will only carry him so far. I thought he had a good submission a couple of years ago when he was very hammy as Jon Voight is. Whereas this year, he's a lot more mellow, and I think him not being nominated last year also speaks to maybe how the site is overestimating Kit Harington, because we all feel that Kit Harington was snubbed last year when he had more to do than Peter Dinklage, and we feel that Peter Dinklage was unjustly awarded. But the Emmy voters obviously don't feel that way because they didn't nominate Kit Harington last year, and they awarded Peter Dinklage for a season when he had very little to do.
I think the thing that I like about Kit Harington, and I think the year's good for him, is we've seen if you rewatch the episode after you know what's going to happen, you can really see how subtle this performance is. It's very much in the eyes. I'm not saying he's like this person, but we did just see a very silent performance win Best Actor at the Oscars. He gets ugly. It's physical. It's from his point of view. Plus, he is and has been the story leading up pre-season and now post-season of Game of Thrones, where it's all been about him. So he might just have that kind of push.
Yeah.
And do you think the fact that the episode is also nominated for writing and directing could help? I mean, obviously it's a very popular episode. And it was the most talked about episode of the season. It's incredibly satisfying to watch at the end. So, I mean, maybe he has enough to push him over.
If you sit down and watch the episodes and you're just like, you just see this and you're like, oh my God, this was amazing, and you've never seen it, you might just tick it off because and not think about the performance aspect of it.
And that's what I was saying towards the beginning. it's this emotional reaction that I think he might get because there is that impact from the episode and from him. He's the focal point. It's about him. It's about his character's journey. And I've got to say, from what Riley said, he should have been nominated for Hard Home and the year before for Watchers on the Wall. So he is overdue as well. So this category is by no means an easy one, and now I'm now so confused. All I can think about is John Voight in Maggie Smith's Downton Abbey clothes, so that's just freaking me out as well. So, so we have a lot to talk about, but we really should wrap it up there. So really, I think the consensus is that it's really Peter Dinklage v. Kit Harington, with possibly Jonathan Banks as the spoiler. Michael Kelly has a good episode. Ben Mendelsohn, he's a very well-respected actor. His episode is slightly underwhelming, and John Voight is John Voight, slightly less hammy than maybe in previous past submissions, but he could be the Downton Abbey Dowager Princess, or whatever you call her, for this category. All right, guys, we'll see you all soon for the drama actress, supporting actress category.
Okay.